Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending tonight's webinar. My name is Talia Newton. I'm the Climate Emergency Project Officer at Bass Coast Shire Council, and I'll be your MC for tonight's webinar. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Bunurong and the Gunai peoples as the traditional owners and custodians of the lands and waters that I'm on and many of you will live and work on too. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, as well as Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be joining us tonight. If you're joining us from elsewhere in Victoria, please feel free to introduce yourself and acknowledge the country you're joining us from in the chat. Tonight's webinar, Finding a Sustainable Team, is part of a series of webinars that Bass Coast and South Gippsland Shire Councils have partnered with Renew on across 2024. Renew have been working in the sustainability space for over 40 years as an independent, not-for-profit body with a mission to inspire, enable and advocate for people to live sustainably in their homes and communities. This webinar, as well as all the other webinars, will be recorded and made available on the CAP, the Community Action Portal, for future viewing. The first 6 webinars in our Sustainable Living series, covering topics such as solar, home batteries, all-electric homes, electric vehicles, and winter comfort, are now available to watch online if you missed those live events, and those links will be in the chat. The 2024 Sustainable Living series is designed to equip you with information and knowledge to make your homes more comfortable, more energy efficient, cheaper to run, and more environmentally friendly to live in. Now, without further delay, I'd like to welcome our expert presenter for tonight, Petra Hammond. Petra founded Meliora Studio and is part of the Build Her Collective. She's a seasoned developer and renovator with 10 projects under her belt and is currently working on an urban cottage in Elphington, redesigning a woodland beach shack in Ocean Grove, and 2 joint venture project developments. She has a passion for finding creative solutions to construction challenges and promoting environmentally sustainable design. Petra holds a Certificate 4 in Building and Construction and is currently studying a degree in architecture. Welcome, Petra, and over to you.
That's a lovely introduction. Thanks, Talia. Yes, my name is Petra. I work for the Build Her Collective. The Build Her Collective is an organisation that is aimed at helping women build. A topic which has become more and more prominent within our group has been building sustainable homes, and we'd like to think we're kind of at the forefront of that. I'll share my screen. So I work as a mentor at the Build Her Collective, and as part of our journey, we just talk people through what their journey is going to look like and how they can create their vision. Okay, so that's going to be a large part of what we're doing today when we talk about finding a sustainable team, which is what your vision is going to look like when you're going to build your house and how you can create the team around that. So when you're looking to find a sustainable team in building, the first thing to know is the fact that you are not supposed to know how to run the whole project. You are going to have to be there to find expertise in other people to help you on your journey. You'll find that a building or construction development project has many different aspects to it, sustainability being a big part, but you'll have to bring in many experts. So you're going to be the driver of the project, and it's your job to steer the ship and basically create the product that aligns to your vision. Okay. But in order to do that, you really have to understand what your vision is. So we always tell people at the start of their building project that they have to create their vision of what the outcome is going to be for their building journey. Now, obviously, you can think it's a building, but there's many elements that will go into that. And that all then comes back to what are your values? So what are you going to be your values during the build process? What do you value most in that kind of journey? So some of the ones we've written down here, and there's a long list of these, but things to consider would be things like time. How long would you like this to take? The money that you want to put into that build, the life cycle of the building. So how long are you going to live in it? How long would you like this building to last? And any environmental kind of considerations around sustainability, environmental impact. So these are all different types of values, okay? But some of these, they're often trade-offs, and some of them have longer considerations than you might think. So we'll take something like money, and you can think, okay, so you might have a budget to build. However, that's just not the only money consideration that you really should have. You have the money during the build, but then if you're building a sustainable home, fingers crossed, some of the products that you put into it will ensure that you reap kind of budgeting after. So if you're choosing things like solar, if you're choosing things like electricity, if you're choosing things like great orientation, so you're less reliant on artificial heating, then actually that will reduce that kind of money after the build. So it's a bit of a trade-off. The life cycle can also be a bit of a trade-off, or a difficult question. I think traditionally houses in Australia have built with a life cycle of about 30 years, which may seem a long time, but it does come around really quickly. So do you want to build a house that lasts longer than that? But there's a trade-off because, sustainability is moving forward at quite a pace. Will a house in 30 years be what we want it to be? Does that make sense? Would it be better to start and have a building that is there for 30 years and then we kind of start again? I think probably not, but it is kind of one of those things you've got to think about. Now, there are some of these kind of values that also kind of go against each other. Some people want a very quick build, but then also they want a really considered build, and those two often don't go together. So what we recommend is you look at those values and you try and rank them as what's most important to you, because we feel if you get that right at the start of your building journey, then you'll kind of have a better process through, because you've set those holistic parameters from the outset. And what we mean by holistic parameters is kind of wide ranging. Okay, so understanding really what you want out of the building, and that's not just functionality, that's a whole set of parameters that will guide you in your journey. Now we're going to spend a bit of time talking about the process of building. And the reason we do that is, one, that's our expertise. And also it's because we find that if we give you that knowledge of what the building process looks like, then you can take that away and start to think, okay, what's important to me and how can I get that into the journey that I have? Okay, so we'll talk about project delivery. There's many ways to construct a house, and not one size fits all. In fact, every person that we see through the door at the Build Her Collective has a different journey, even if they feel like they've got a very similar set of values. Their journey is often very different. So I like to start by giving an example. So let's say you own a block of land, a large block of land in the country, and it has an 80s kind of villa brick house sitting on it, and you've realized that this house, needs updating. It's probably quite energy inefficient nowadays. It might not suit your family needs anymore. So what do you want to do with it? What are your options? Okay. So they really go from the start, not doing too much, just doing a cosmetic alteration to it. Cosmetic alterations are just kind of where you're not moving really any walls or only doing minor walls. And then you kind of just like the interiors, you just change those over, but you're not really changing the fabric of the building. Alternatively, you could do a major alteration. You could knock down quite a few walls, but still within the existing footprint. You could do a new build. You could decide to knock it down and start anew. Or you could just extend on from that, the footprint that you have, and do an extension. Those are all options available to you. The sustainability of those, I think, is a question you might have to answer yourself. There's many people that feel that a new build, you can orientate around solar gain really easily. However, at the same time, if you're knocking down a perfectly good house, then you're adding quite a lot more carbon into the build, or discarding a lot of material that's already there. So I suppose that again goes back to your values as to what you feel is most sustainable. And then once you've decided what you feel will be needed for your family or yourself in the building, you then have to decide how to build it. And there's many different ways to do that. You could do an owner builder, for example. I've done owner builder. It's a challenge. It's fun. Not always fun, but most of it is fun. You can assemble your own team. Okay, so you can get, say, a building designer, you can get a builder, you can get them together to create your vision. You could do a design and build, or design and construct, as they're often called, where you go to a design and construct firm. You'll often see these listed on the web as design and construct builders, and they will design and then build the product for you. Or another traditional method is to go to an architect. Architect will design the home for you, and then they will tender that for you. Again, there isn't really a more sustainable option in those. They could all be sustainable, but what is important is understanding the fact that sustainability would be part of your value system, and therefore you've got to choose people who meet your value system, which we'll talk about in a bit. There's also a lot of terms thrown out there, which I won't go into too much, but I wanted to raise them around different types of buildings sustainably. So you'll hear terms such as passive house, star rating, biophilic design, low toxicity. So there's different ways to build sustainably. And again, it's not a one size fits all. There's no right or wrong answer. I think the key is to look at research them all and see which one suits you. So passive house is an accreditation you can get. It's a very high level of accreditation around the orientation and sustainability of a building. Star rating, I think we've kind of all probably heard of. It's an energy rating given to a house. It's a kind of formal process where you put in all your parameters of the house you're building and you get a star rating out. I'm quite passionate around biophilic design. Biophilic design is where you design a home around the nature that is either inside but primarily often outside the home. And this can be a great way to build sustainably. I had a house where the orientation was to the west. So we had a lot of westerly sun that came into the rear of the living areas of my house. But we had a large tree at the back of the house, and it was a deciduous tree. So in the winter, the leaves fell and it let beautiful natural light in. But during the harsh summer evenings with that westerly light, the tree really shaded it. So you can use that to really build sustainably and reduce your reliance on artificial heating and cooling. But some of these are, for example, star ratings don't take into account biophilic design. So you might want to have a mixture of these, or you might choose to do your own thing. These things like Passive House, star ratings, they're kind of official ratings, official accreditation, but you might just decide, you know what, I want to just build a very sustainable house, and this is sustainability to me. That's what it looks like. And therefore, that's what I'm going to do. And an example of that would be things around low toxicity, which is quite a big topic within the Build Her network, around ensuring that the products that we bring into the house don't produce kind of toxic side effects. A lot of products, and we'll go into this a wee bit later. So just paint. Paint is a classic one. They bring in these kind of toxins into the house. So do we want to reduce that? Okay. So we have our building blueprint to help us understand the process. And I'm going to go through this with an eye to sustainability and where we feel it is important to get sustainability into the big picture. Okay, so this is kind of like a snakes and ladders boards, which we'll go through. And we start at the top left here. Okay, so we've decided to build, and we're very excited, and we're going to go on this journey. We know the reasons we have to go on this journey. There will be reasons. No one just decides to build because that's just what they really want to do. There's always kind of drivers behind that. Okay, and it's important to understand those as to what you want to get out of it. Step one is to think about the big picture. So start thinking about the big picture and what are the needs of the build. Okay, and this is also where we're going to have to do that work that we just talked about, which is setting up your vision and your values. Okay, so what is your vision for the build, and what are those most important values to you? Since we're all on this call, I would assume sustainability is going to be one of those drivers to you. We then need to think about funds. How are we going to fund this build? What's it going to look like in terms of finance? We might start to speak to people about how much is available to us. We might start thinking about, as I said before, what features are going to be included in the build, which mean that in the future, when we are living in this house, we are living within our means. So are we going to make some inclusions which lower costs in the future? Then we talk to a designer. And I think it's written here that this is the fun part. And we often find people are very excited at this part. So you engage a designer, and that could look different in different ways. As I said, there's many ways to build. You could be going to an architect. You could go to a building designer. You could be going to a design and construct construction firm who have their own in-house team to design that for you. Okay. What we find is really important here is to, one, engage a designer that meets your values, and also to find somebody who is willing to share your vision. We're back to finances again. Once you've done the design bit, you will probably have to reevaluate your finances. Okay, this is the part where things are actually being written down and they're becoming a bit more tangible. So can we afford to do it? Another driver that often comes up is around permits. And the reason this is a driver is because permits take time. So is time one of your drivers? Now, some builds require more permits than others. Okay, so do you want a quick build, or are you happy to sit in council waiting for an outcome of your dream home? No matter what, you will require some permits. There's 2 permits which you normally need. One is your planning permit, which you obtain through council. The vast majority of builds, unless you are actually just doing a cosmetic renovation, will also require a building permit as well, which you can go through. You can go through some councils to get your building permit, but most people go through a private building inspector to get that. There will be other documentation that is required for this. And there'll be other experts, which we'll go over in a minute, but there'll be other experts such as your energy rater that you'll need. You might need some others as well, like quantity surveyors, that kind of thing. You then go to tendering in budgets. So this often happens if you're going through an architect and they run a formal tender process. If you're doing a design and construct firm, it might be a more simple process, or they might have only given you a price indication before that. But what tendering is, it is going out to several builders who could potentially build your home, and then you get quotes back. From there, you go to kind of a deposit and the site prep. The site prep very much depends on the style of building you're doing. It can be demolition, which is step 8, or it can just be kind of, if you're doing a kind of more of a renovation or an extension, it can be less than demolition. It can just be tidying up or doing other site work, such as getting kind of stuff disconnected. You then go through to the base stage. So the base stage is really where you're putting the foundations on. I think this is one of the most important things, getting the foundations to your house right is very important. You will start to see for the first time the outline of your house, which I think is really important to people. One of my favorite steps is the framing stage, where the frame goes up. Slightly depending, there's different forms of framing you can have. You can have timber, you can have kind of metal framing, or you can have kind of formed framing as well. So that goes up. Once you have kind of the walls in place, you then go through to lock up. Lock up is where you will see you will have an external shell of your house which is complete. Okay, so the windows have gone in. You can actually theoretically lock the doors. From there, you go to the fixing stage, where you actually put all of the jewelry inside your house. You put all the lovely stuff, so the joinery, the carpets, the stuff that you will see every day, that goes into the house. You then go through to practical completion, where the builder might say, we're done, and you might say, I don't think so. And then you go through to the defect stage, where anything kind of that you feel needs to be rectified, happens. Now we find that the defect stage happens to everyone, okay? And don't feel particularly negative about it. I think your builder would usually prefer you to come to them if you have issues and just talk them out, and they will get them fixed and sorted. And then you move in and you style and you enjoy and you make your house a home after all of your hard work. So the reason I talked you through that is because if you understand what happens in the right order it's supposed to go in, then it could flow more smoothly. And if you do kind of the wrong step, then it can get costly. We've seen before where people have gone too hard, too quick, and not really thought about the big picture first. And because of that, they've had to go back a few steps and reevaluate that big picture and what are their values. By the time they get a set of plans, it just doesn't meet their vision. Okay. With sustainable elements, it is really important to think about them at the start. And the reason is because retrofitting sustainable elements can be really expensive. So if you think about some sustainable elements, let's take a hot topic, which is orientation. So orientation is a concept which uses the natural light to kind of naturally heat or cool your house. Okay, so we want beautiful windows to the north to get northerly light, which will heat our home naturally. We're in Victoria, we often need a heated home. So we're going to get an orientation that warms up our house. We're going to have eaves over those windows to ensure the harsh summer sun isn't coming in to that space. But we're also going to limit windows on the southern sides to stop those kind of cooler, to stop kind of the warmness escaping through those southern windows. We might have less windows also on the east and the west. I'm not a particular fan of westerly windows because they can get really, really hot. And actually it's very difficult to shade easterly or westerly windows because the sun's quite low when it's in the east or the west and it shines directly in. So eaves don't really work very well. So that's kind of how to orientate your building. If that's really important to you, and it will save money in the long run by lowering artificial heating cooling bills, then it's really important to speak to your designer at the start and get that included because you can't really retrofit that into a house very cost effectively. So yes, so think about it at the start, speak to the designer and let them understand or know your values. Now this is, we often talk about the fact that a building is a balance. Okay, so whilst we like to paint a picture of it being kind of this just snakes and ladders, but you get to the end in a nice linear way, we often find that actually building is kind of a back and forward and it actually becomes a bit of a wheel. Okay, and whilst we try to avoid it, in some ways we just accept it and say, you know what, to get to the right end goal, sometimes we need to go backwards in order to go forward. Okay. So just to go through this, we often see that people kind of go to their architect, their building designer with a vision and a budget. Often they come back and those don't meet. Often the architect has built an amazing house, but actually it's just too expensive. And in that case, you have to go back and say, no, we can't. Well, you could investigate whether you could get more money. If you can't, then you're going back to the designer and say, no, we need to kind of reevaluate here. This can happen with sustainability as well. So if you come back and you find that the designer hasn't incorporated the elements that you want, it's okay to go back and then move forward. In fact, it's better to move back and then go forward than just accepting something that isn't right for you. Okay, we're going to talk about labour and materials because they're really important to the overall product, which is really going to be your home or your development. And they're also really important to building your home in a sustainable way. We're first going to talk about kind of the labour component of that and the trades and the builders that you're going to use. Now, I think I said at the start, you're not supposed to be the person who knows everything. On a building journey, even if you're doing an owner builder, you're still going to have to bring in a load of experts, a load of qualified trades to do that work for you. Okay. And it's very important that they share your vision. But how do we know that they are qualified to do what we want them to do? And particularly from a sustainable point of view. So if we are looking to build sustainably in a sustainable way, and say we want to achieve a certain level of accreditation, either as a passive house or as having a star rating, then how do we get that? And these are the ways to really qualify those trades. So you can ask for their license. They'll often hold a license. If they are a passive house builder, they will have accreditation as that. It's also important to look at their insurance. Most trades in Victoria will be required to hold insurance to different levels. You can actually go onto the VBA website and actually look up somebody's accreditation. Experience and expertise. This is for trades that often aren't required to have licensing. Not that there's many anymore, but there are still some. So you might ask for references. You might ask to be shown examples of previous work and then get references for that. I think qualifying trades also comes down to their communication skills. I think often trades aren't the best at communication skills, and sometimes that's okay. But if you are having somebody who you've emailed or called many times and they're just not calling you back, maybe that's a sign that you might need to move on to somebody else. Pricing structure. Many trades will have different forms of pricing. Some, depending on their license, require certain levels of pricing. So if you have a builder, they'll have a contract which has different prices set out in different steps. So it's usually, say, a 5% deposit. Then you get to kind of different stages where you pay different amounts. Is that pricing structure suitable for you? We often hear stories of people having to pay large upfront costs for builders to come to site. Things like that we're really, really wary of unless you get excellent references or they've worked for you before. Just be careful around that. Working out site visit and inspections. And this is something where you have to talk to them, see whether what you're after meets what they're willing to give you. I know some builders who very much don't like the owners to come to site very often or in an unexpected way. And some builders are more open to that. So what are you looking for? Are you okay to be sending an email and then going to see the property at a certain time, or would you like a more flexible arrangement? And then looking at their contracts and agreements, there are people who will go over this for you. A lot of people have their contracts and agreements looked over by a professional just to make sure that everything's all right. But you might feel comfortable doing that depending on your background and also what your kind of the risk you're willing to take on. But I've mentioned before, what is really important is making sure the people you get on, even though you're not supposed to be the expert in this, but they do share your team alignment, okay? And that team alignment can look different. So how is your team going to be aligned? Are we going to have shared vision and clear goals? The answer is, if you are looking to build sustainably, then the answer is probably yes. You want a shared vision and you want your trades to have the shared vision with you. That might be slightly different for different trades. So, for example, I would probably really want my designer or my builder to share my vision of sustainability. But if I was hiring, say, a plumber, or I might not care so much. However, I do think that most trades really can create a sustainable build for you. Even if you think about the way that materials are handled. So if you have, for example, a carpenter, what are they doing with the offcuts? Are they just chucking them out? Are they kind of like recycling those materials? Are they ensuring that there's limited product wastage, that kind of thing? If that's important to you, then you need to find somebody who can work with you on that. Effective communication and collaboration is really important. Ensuring coordinated efforts, that feeling of empowerment, finding a team that is flexible, finding a team that is innovative. Innovation isn't really important to some people and less to others. I find that there's kind of two types of tradie and or builder. There are the builders who are very much, this is the product that I have and this is the product that I build. And it's tried and it's tested and you know it's going to work, which is great in one way. But if you're looking to build sustainably, then there might be some innovative products that you want to bring in to the build. And is that builder going to match yours? I think it's quite important to be quite upfront about your vision with your team because of that. Other aspects of team alignment include accountability, resilience. The building process is a long road. We find that people come out of it often very happy, but almost changed because of the process, because it is often quite, it requires resilience. Having a positive impact and continuous learning. Are you wanting to find somebody who is going to kind of grow and wants to grow again with you? So just moving on to materials. Now, materials and products, we often think of sustainability as the actual house itself and the way it's constructed with orientation. I think I went over orientation and the materials that are used on the outside of the house. But there's also that kind of materials that are used on the inside of the house as well. And how can we make sure that they're sustainable? So a big part of this is assessing materials and products. So it is a fast changing environment. with materials and products, especially in the sustainability space. I think there's a lot of tech language used, but there's also a lot of greenwashing. Okay, now greenwashing is, and we'll all have seen it, it can be quite a trendy thing, sustainability, and people often jump on the bandwagon just to get sales when they're actually not living that as a value. They just see it as a way to kind of get more people on board. And we've all seen websites where they have one page of like, this is a sustainable builder, and they have a picture of lots of solar panels, because it's the only way, obviously, you can build sustainably, is putting some solar panels on the roof. But are they actually living that value, or are they just trying to greenwash you and pretend that they're sustainable when they're really not? We find that there's quite a lot of misleading or false data out there. A lot of people try to sell their products so often, and especially when the market is quite new and sustainable products are still quite new. It's really important to dive deep and see whether they are actually providing the benefits that they claim. There's also kind of deceptive imagery. I think I've mentioned that. There's green lighting as well. But how do we kind of overcome this? Well, we research early. We should be really researching at the beginning of the project as to what items we want to include. A good example of this, I think, is the kind of one with natural stone, which has come up recently. I mean, we think about sustainability as creating a kind of environmentally sustainable home. However, the natural stone artificial stone or quartz has recently been kind of banned in Victoria, or Australia, I should say. And that's because it wasn't sustainable as a product to the health of the people who were working on it. So there's often sustainability factors just outside of environmental factors as well, and the people who are working on these products as well. So research early, really be aware of, again, what are your values, but also how are you making decisions? Are you making them on cost? Are you making them on their longevity? Are you making on their carbon footprint, their sustainability, or their appearance? There's no right or wrong answer, but I think it's really important to be conscious about how you are making decisions, so that you understand their sustainability credentials going forward. The life cycle of a product is also really important. How long is it going to last? Is it a very sustainable product now? But are you going to have to replace it in a certain time period, which would make it less sustainable? The other classic one is there products which you can use which require kind of low maintenance going forward? So, for example, can we use a timber product, and instead of painting it, which creates a lot of kind of chemicals which are going onto your wood, which we'll have to retreat in kind of 10 years' time, is there a product we can use that will kind of grey off the material and creates that kind of natural effect, which will mean that we don't have to use those kind of artificial paints in years to come? Okay. So just some more on building sustainably, and this is some of the regulations that have come in more recently. this is an example of kind of greenwashing that I find, because a lot of builders will say, oh yes, we build 7-star homes, which sounds great, but actually kind of the minimum that all houses now have to be is 7 stars. So they're meeting the minimum requirement and not necessarily going beyond that. But the 7-star rating recently came in this year, actually. So the National Construction Code was updated in 2022. There were states and territories were given kind of a while, 2 years or so, to implement those changes. But what those changes means that all new homes have to meet a 7-star rating, okay? But also renovations or alterations and additions to homes also now need to meet the 7-star rating as well if they are above certain thresholds. So if you alter over 50% of a building, you'll need to bring the whole building up to 7 stars. And if you do an addition over 25% of the existing footprint of the home, then you'll also need to bring that home up to 7 stars. This can be quite a challenging thing for alterations and additions to existing homes to get them up to a 7-star rating, because often they were built in a way which didn't really lend itself to being 7 stars, so they weren't orientated correctly. The insulation, there's often no insulation in the walls. There's often kind of single pane glass. So it can be different. It can be difficult to bring those kind of old buildings up. But just some things that are here to help. Now, the old and the new parts can have separate ratings, and that will bring you up to kind of 7 stars overall. There's some discretion from building inspectors if you've really tried to bring the old building up to 7 stars. And there's simple things you can do to either alterations and additions, which is replacing windows, ceiling, floor and external wall insulation, ditching gas, adding solar, water recycling, but also adding kind of some simple things such as ceiling fans really actually helps with that energy rating to bring those kind of alterations and additions up. As one of the final parts of what we'll be doing today, we're going to actually look at a project that we did at the Build Her Collective and look how we built sustainability. So this is a project case study about what we considered in the build, okay? So this is a house in Fairfield in Victoria. In fact, there were 2 houses. It was 2 townhouses built on a large block, but it was 2 townhouses. So the first thing that was looked at, and this was during the design phase, was the size of the build. And they wanted this to be a family home, but at the same time, they didn't want this to be too big. I think in the past, there has been a tendency to build very large homes with lots of open space, which may be lovely to live in. But the reality is, the larger the space, the more you are going to take to heat or cool that space. So whilst we want spaces that are comfortable and fit our needs, we don't want spaces to be kind of too large to kind of just create excessive heating and cooling. The use of materials. So there was a mixed use of materials here. Brick was used because brick is a very sustainable project. They use recycled bricks, actually. And brick is it kind of has a thermal mass. So when the sun hits it, it warms up and it can heat a place by through that thermal load, and then also it can kind of cool a place as well. So it kind of heats when it needs to, when the sun's on it, and it kind of cools a house when it needs to. There was also the recycling of wastage. They also used recycled materials. Now they designed for solar. They actually designed the roof to have kind of solar panels on it, but they also had battery storage. They ditched the gas. They had water retention on site. They had a system of getting the water into tanks, which then fed the garden, and they did the the grey water as well, which fed the laundry and also into the toilets as well. There was orientation, which I've mentioned before, and solar gain and thermal massing, which again is that brick, but also the floor was a concrete slab, and they designed the windows to kind of heat that slab. The other thing is passive ventilation. This had some high windows, not particularly high, but there were some high windows that allowed hot air to rise and escape when needed. And also there was wrapping as well. So wrapping of the house, wrapping is where you kind of take your external paper wrapping, but you actually tape it up. You tape up all the gaps, so it kind of comes this sealed product. And then you can really just measure the airflow in and out. Okay, so we're going to look at one example, and this is really around the costs of products that you put in and how they will perform over their life cycle. And this was more applicable before the new regulations came in May. So now most houses, if you're building a new house, you really can't have gas. Before, you still can have them on renovations or alterations. However, they're difficult because they require, it's a bit of a trade-off where they reduce your star rating. But this is an example of really working out the real costs of gas heating versus an electric heat pump. So first we're going to look at gas. Okay, so the initial cost of gas is quite low, actually. It may have gone up, but it's still quite low in compared to other forms of heating and cooling. Okay, it can vary depending on the complexity of the setup and the site connection. Now, the operating costs can fluctuate. In fact, they can fluctuate really heavily. Efficiency, gas heating systems can have good efficiency, especially if they are kind of high efficient condensing units. But the environmental impact is where we really have to look at this. So gas heating releases CO2 and it contributes to greenhouse gases and climate change. It's not a very sustainable option moving forward. But versus the heat pump. Now the heat pump, and now we looked into this and actually we really did some cost analysis. So the heat pump system, especially the very efficient ones, and it is a new technology which is getting better all the time, but the cost up front tends to be quite significantly higher, especially with kind of installation on top of it as well. But the operating costs of a heat pump are much lower, And especially if you do have kind of heat, electricity generating systems within your build, then that can help as well. So you should see the benefits of kind of the life cycle costs of this kind of heat pump over gas moving forward. And of course, being electric, a heat pump has fewer emissions that cause global warming. So just looking at the numbers, so the heat pump for the cost on the Rathmines house, and the supplier was RACV Solar, who we worked with. It was nearly £5,000. It was 4,900 per house. Okay. There was an option to do this kind of big kettle, which was half the price, but yeah, it wasn't as good. But the gas to fit was $3,000. Yeah. Oh no, sorry. So the gas connection required was 3,000, and the heating system was 1,500. So gas was actually already on the site, so it would have cost the 1,500. Yeah. So the heat pump costs moving forward, so they have high efficiency. So the high efficiency, it was costing, even at peak times, around $290 like to heat the house, whereas the gas, the annual cost was coming out at kind of $575. This was a few years ago as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's gone up. Okay, and then you can also look at the greenhouse gas emissions, and you'll see kind of the heat pump has half of the kind of greenhouse gas emissions as the gas option. So just to explain, so heat pump upfront would be nearly 5,000 and per year 290. Gas upfront 4,500 if you didn't have gas connected, and then per year 575. If you looked at that, the payback on investment would be 1.4 years. So you're really talking about the fact that even though there was this higher upfront cost, you are seeing those benefits come through. Okay, and I'm pleased to say that I know the owners of this house, and they have solar on the roof and they have a battery, and their energy bill is pretty much close to zero, which is great. And I hope you can see from that there is a balance that has to be struck. And we find that building is a balance of decisions and a balance of values that create your overall project. But something's very clear. You need to be informed to make the right decisions, and you need to be informed to make the right decisions for your team. Okay, so your team needs to know where they are going with you. So you need to get your vision and your values correct, and you need to explain that to your team. However, if you research and you get it right and you ask experts, and you may be confused, you may have many different voices that are saying stuff to you, but you do that research and then you decide what your vision and values are going to look forward, then you can create good relationships with your project team, and that will pay you back in buckets moving forward. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. That's the end of my presentation. And I will move back to Talia.
I'm really glad that you touched on the greenwashing. I actually had some questions around, greenwashing and finding ways to avoid it. We'll get into the Q&A shortly, but I'd just like to talk about a couple of programs that we have that might be useful to people watching. So the first is home energy kits. So the local libraries have thermal imaging cameras that are available to borrow as well as home energy and water efficiency kits. The kits include instruction manuals to help identify areas of heat loss in your home. They also have induction cooktops and some other things as well. There'll be a link in the chat about where you can find more information on those. The other thing that we have available for Bass Coast Shire Council residents is the Solar Savers program. So Solar Savers is a local government initiative that helps households and businesses install quality and affordable rooftop solar and batteries. Since 2019, Solar Savers have supported the installation of over 600 solar PV systems in Victoria, and there'll be a link to more information on Solar Savers in the chat as well. Now we have about 20-25 minutes available for questions. So if anyone does have any questions for Petra, please type them into the Q&A function and we'll try to answer as many as possible. And a reminder, you can also upvote questions by pressing the thumbs up icon in the chat too. So the first question that we have is, do you know if there's a reputable list of sustainability-focused tradies or builders to avoid going through architects or expensive passive house designers that can be accessed? They've said, I like the idea of checking previous jobs of tradies, but what if you want to start from a semi-reliable sustainability tradie who know the latest environmental saving products around energy and water savings, insulation, building materials, etc.?
And look, you raise a really good point, and I tried to allude to that in the fact that there's a lot of people who claim to be experts, and they probably are experts, but they do charge quite a lot for their expertise. And that you don't always have to do it. You don't have, I mean, I know several people who've produced a passive house and they're great, but it's an expensive accreditation and often the builders do charge quite a lot. Just those budgets aren't available to everyone. But just because you're not building a passive house does not mean that you shouldn't build a sustainable house. So it's really about, you can actually get most of those principles without going down a passive house route. The only thing I would say is it's very difficult to find a list that you're looking for. The best I have come up with is there are some groups, particularly on Facebook. I'm a member of one which is my energy efficient house. If you know it, it's very good. There are some people with some really amazing spreadsheets around heat pumps that if you want to go down it, they tend to be the best source of information that I found outside networking. And I mean networking not professionally, but just in your network. So just going out and speaking to people in your network that could provide information. I think it is a bit of a gap. I think somebody could kind of champion the VBA to really add that to their list of accreditors or accreditations, if you know what I mean, just to say what their specialism is. The problem, I would say, is the fact that you're still going to have to rely quite a lot on recommendations, because people can say this stuff, but unless you're getting recommendations from other people, they can tell you a lot. I think we mentioned just greenwashing. It's very trendy. There's a lot of information, and when there's a lot of information, there's a lot of people telling you they're the people that know the best. So it's really the best way to find it out is through recommendations.
Yeah, it makes sense.
If that answers your question, I would love to say there is a list, a magic list, but there just isn't at the moment that I know of. If there is, pass it my way.
Makes sense that it's very specific to the local area.
Yeah, and look, it's different for different areas as well. So orientation in my area, I'm in central Melbourne. We work on quite small blocks. It might be very different to, so there is different specialisms as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. The next question we have is, how did you find the owner builder experience? Have you tried other methods and how did they stack up, especially when considering a sustainable build?
Yeah, and really interesting there actually. So I have done owner builder. Owner builder is not for the faint-hearted. The only thing I would say with an owner builder is it's kind of like choose your own adventure slightly, because you can do the whole thing by yourself if you would like. So you can employ every trade if you want. Or you can do the route where you employ a builder to do X, often to get to, say, a certain stage, often to get to lock-up stage, and then from there you can hire the trades moving forwards. You do still need to go into a contract with the builder to do that. But then you're only taking on that kind of end finishing piece, which can be slightly easier, and at least you're kind of settled that the structure of the building is good, and you've got a builder to do that, and that's nice and safe. So you can do either. I am probably going to do owner builder in the future. I have worked with architects. What I would say about architects is, and I know I'm going to sound like a squeaky wheel, but choose somebody who understands your vision, because they often design to what their vision look like. And if their vision doesn't meet your vision, then that's the problem. Okay. The other thing I've found with architects is they can be quite expensive, which is good for some people if you have the money. If you don't, there are other ways to do it. I haven't done the design and construct myself, but it can be a bit of a cheaper way. But again, they're going to have to share your vision. If you're pulling your team together, so you're getting a building designer and then a builder and building together, you do have a bit more flexibility, I find, because you can choose a building designer. Some people are a bit sniffy about building designers, but I find you can get some really good building designers that are very much on the forefront of sustainability. I don't think just because you've got an architectural license isn't a magic bullet for expertise in this area. So you can find a good building designer and a good builder to meet your expertise. So there's not, unfortunately, one size fits all. I would look at your budget, the time you've got to manage the project, and again, your values, and try and find somebody that matches with.
Yeah, thank you. The next question you've sort of already alluded to, I think, a bit, but also with the owner builder experience, do you think that someone could do that without previous experience in the building process?
It will be tough. The ultimate thing is, well, look, I mean, yes, you could. It's just how much time you have to put into it, whether you're going to enjoy that process. Building is not for the faint-hearted at any point, okay? But, you can do it. But as I said, you can choose your own adventure and do an owner builder, but get somebody to do most of the work for you. And that doesn't have to be a builder either. That can just be a leading hand. So on the last one, I used a carpenter. This carpenter was actually hoping to get their building license, so it worked out quite well. And they could use that as a project to get their building license. So they were a very knowledgeable carpenter, and they got me up to lockup. Okay, so again, it's about building your team together, and yeah, making sure that fits. Good communication, very important. Also, I would say is documentation for an owner builder is really important as well. So, for example, if you go to some building designers, the documentation can be fairly, or actually engineers as well, the documentation can be fairly light. If you're doing an owner builder, you might want a few more documents in there. Does that make sense? So really set out plans for, say, a structural slab, that kind of thing, they can give you.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is the final question. Do you think the industry is becoming more sustainable overall? And are normal builders and contractors more aware of sustainable building practices?
100% yes. They might have had to be dragged up by the new construction code, which came in. But I think overall, more people are finding, do you know what? The energy crisis probably did more for sustainability than anything else over the last couple of years. I think it's really come to people's minds around the cost of heating or cooling a house is just something which we can't take for granted. So we do need to build efficiently. And whilst it was painful, I think it all dragged us up, as did the construction codes, as I said. I do feel that there's still a little bit of a tick box element, even with the 7-star ratings. It very much still feels like a game of, oh, what can I do to get those 7 stars? That's the minimum, and we'll move on. And I also kind of feel that just because you've got 7 stars, one doesn't mean your home is sustainable. But also, just because you've got, say, 9 or 10 stars means your home's sustainable. It's really a value system. So I always go back to my tree that was on the western side. Now, I did not get any additional energy rating for having a tree on my westerly windows. And yet it was the best thing you could ever have done, is to plant a tree in that spot, because it really, a deciduous tree, because it really did, winter light just came in, and then summer sun, it was cooled down just naturally. And yet you don't get any kind of energy rating for that. So there is that still element of a tick box exercise. But no, overall, definitely people are aware. And to be honest, people are only getting more aware. Builders are becoming more aware because people are asking. And we find in our group, it's a hot topic, and we're very passionate about it. So we're pleased that more people are coming through the door, really wanting that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. I think that's all the questions that we have tonight. So thanks so much, everyone, for coming along and for your time. Hopefully this event was informative and helped to answer some of the questions that you had around picking the right team for your build or your renovation. I'd like to extend a very special thank you to our expert presenter tonight, Petra, for lending us her experience and expertise. I'd like to thank Doug from Renew for his behind-the-scenes support as well. And a final reminder too, that this webinar has been recorded and will be posted within the next fortnight or so on the CAP. You'll also be able to find other recordings of previous webinars there as well. That's everything for tonight. Hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Bye.